The galactic banquet began in silence, as it always did when the Dravari hosted. Their station, orbiting the neutron star they called Furnace, was a monument to the Apex Code, massive, sharp-edged, built without a single comfort. Beauty was weakness to the Dravari. Purpose was all. Delegates from over 40 species attended. But no one truly believed this was diplomacy. It was theater, where the Predators reminded everyone who ruled the dark. The Dravari stood 2 meters tall, their bodies a lattice of obsidian scales and pulsing muscle. Their eyes reflected light unnaturally, as if absorbing it and judging its worth. They had devoured their way through 7 empires, and each species that had resisted had been converted into food or footnotes. Tonight, they had new prey at their table. Humans, a species from a forgotten blue planet on a minor spiral arm, newly spacefaring, fragile-boned, unarmed in every evolutionary sense. No claws, no fangs, no thermal vision, no natural toxins, not even strength, just noise, curiosity, and now an ambassador. Her name was Amira Wells. She wore no armor, no neuromesh, a simple navy suit, neat hair tied back, and an expression Dravari would later fail to interpret. She approached the table without flinching, her step steady, her breathing calm. She was alone. The apex species waited for her offering. Each species had brought something. The Xerex presented a hunting mask carved from the bone of a rival alpha. The Dalash brought fermented spinal fluid. The Dravari themselves had laid out seared Korgal, meat of a species once considered unkillable. Amira placed a small basket and a sealed bottle on the table. "From Earth," she said, "sourdough bread and red wine, aged 10 years. They stared. It was the youngest of them, Ravik, blood-sired heir to Haifong Jurek, who laughed first, a dry, guttural click like a blade on bone. "Is this a joke? Are we to spread our enemies on crust?" Another chuckled. "What kind of prey brings peasant grain and spoiled fruit to a war table?" Amira said nothing. She unwrapped the loaf with slow precision. The crust cracked softly. The scent, a blend of yeast, warmth, and patience, spread into the metallic chill of the room. Then she uncorked the wine. Its perfume was deep, dark, a quiet rebellion against the sterility of the Dravari's domain. "This," she said, slicing the bread, "is made from wild cultures, harvested bacteria, fed, nurtured, shaped over time. The wine fermented, refined, aged. Both are alive when begun. Both are dead when finished. But the in-between, that is where the flavor comes from." The room didn't speak. That unsettled them more than the joke had. Amira placed a slice of bread before Jurek. "Poured a glass. Try." Jurek stared at the offering as if it might explode. Ravik sneered. "He'll choke." "No," said Jurek. His voice was like iron dragged through dust. "He knows better." The Dravari were not afraid of poison. They had evolved stomachs that could digest toxins, acids, even certain metals. They feared irrelevance. But curiosity was harder to kill. He took the bread. Bit down. Crunch. Chew. Pause. His eyes narrowed. He reached for the wine. The sip was slow, deliberate. He swirled it. Let it sit. Swallowed. The silence grew heavier. Jurek looked at her, voice low. "You cooked this." "We cultivated it," she corrected. "No violence required." Ravik hissed. "What power is there in a meal without meat?" Amira turned to him. "More than you understand." He slammed a clawed hand on the table. "We conquered the Korgal by ripping out their throats mid-charge. We crushed the Mervathi by boiling their oceans. What have you conquered, soft-spoken one? What have you devoured?" Amira folded her hands. "We conquered time, fire, metal, disease. We devoured the unknown. Not to end it, but to understand it. And when we met something we couldn't kill, we learned to cooperate with it. That's why we're still here." Jurek studied her. "You think stories will save you?" "No," she replied, "but they might change you." Another Dravari leaned forward. "We measure worth in blood." "Then you've measured nothing," she said calmly, "because blood ends. What lives beyond it is memory, culture, and what we offered you wasn't bread and wine. It was memory made edible. For a moment, the table was nothing but breath. The Dravari were old, but this moment was new. They had seen thousands of prey species plead, beg, threaten, lie, but this was different. This wasn't a plea. It wasn't a challenge. It was a mirror, one they didn't know how to read. Jurek broke the silence. This wine, you said it took years. Yes. And still you waited. She nodded. Not everything we kill dies. Some things become better. The elder predator picked up his glass again, sipped, closed his eyes. For the first time in centuries, he felt still. Ravik growled, frustrated. You let her trick you with flavor. No, Jurek said quietly. She brought something we've never tasted. Not in flesh, not in bone. What then? Restraint. Amira rose. We didn't come to impress you. We came to sit at the same table. If that's not acceptable, we'll leave. She turned and began to walk away. Wait, Jurek said. She paused. Bring more of that bread. She smiled. We will, she said. And next time, dessert. No one laughed, but no one stopped her. In a hall where bones once broke to prove strength, silence had bent in a new direction, not with a weapon, but with a meal. High-Fong Jurek sat alone hours after the banquet ended, glass half full, its crimson hue catching the station's artificial starlight. The taste of fermented grapes still lingered on his tongue, foreign yet grounding. He had hunted 1,000 beasts, crushed empires beneath claw and code, but nothing had ever made him feel the way that bread did. He couldn't name it. Other Dravari whispered. Some mocked the moment, dismissing it as theatrics. Others remained silent, disturbed not by the food, but by the calm with which the human had delivered it. Amira returned the next cycle. No fanfare, no guard, just a slate tablet under her arm and that same calm gaze. Jurek received her privately this time, not to dominate, not to interrogate, but to listen. You want to understand, she said, so I brought stories. She laid the tablet before him. With a touch, it projected images, moving scenes colored and alive. These are not military records, she explained. They're fiction, myths, parables, the bones of our culture. The first was a lioness who raised a wounded gazelle. In the next, a man carried his enemy through a snowstorm to save him. Then a story of a machine, built for war, who rewrote itself to grow flowers instead. Jurek leaned forward, confused. None of these end in conquest, he said. No, she replied. They end in understanding. He clicked his jaw. Why? Because conquest ends. Empathy doesn't. You sound religious. We're not, Amira said, but we believe meaning isn't found in what you kill. It's in what you choose not to. He stared at the lioness frozen on the screen. Your species survived this way? No, she said. We survived despite our instincts. Our history is full of violence. But we evolved something else, too. A sense that maybe, just maybe, not every enemy must die. He looked down at his claws. You fear death, she said softly, but you fear irrelevance more. Jurek didn't deny it. Ravik stormed in midway through. He hadn't been invited, but Jurek let him speak. This is weakness. The younger one growled. They lull us with softness. Bread, wine, fairy tales. While we sit still, they study us. Exactly, Amira said. We study everything. We always have. It's how we survived wolves, plagues, asteroids. We didn't overpower nature. We adapted. Ravik sneered. So you're parasites. Amira shrugged. You can call it that. But even parasites learn. Apex predators stagnate. Parasites evolve. That hit deeper than it should have. Jurek raised a hand. Enough, both of you. Silence. He turned to Amira. Tell me, do you fear us? She considered it. Yes, but not because of your claws. We fear what happens when you believe you can't change. That, more than anything, held weight. The Dravari believed in strength as identity. But Amira had offered them an alternative. Strength as choice. He gestured to the tablet again. That story, the machine that grew flowers. What happened to it? It rusted, but the flowers spread. Jurek said nothing. His chest rose and fell, slow and deep. The Korgel, he said after a pause. We ate them to show superiority. But I remember how they died, still biting, even as we burned their nests. They didn't change. They couldn't. And that's why they're extinct. Amira replied. Adaptation is the only apex trait that matters. He looked at her again. You are not predators. She nodded. No, but we are dangerous. Why? Because we survive without domination. And when we do fight, it's for something bigger than hunger. Jurek frowned. What? She leaned forward. Each other. That word landed like a meteor in the chamber. The Dravari had never fought for anyone but themselves. Their unity was based on lineage and dominance, not care or trust. The idea of fighting for another, without blood claim or survival debt, was foreign, terrifying, and powerful. You said you cultivated that bred over days? We've cultivated our culture over centuries. Ravik scoffed again. They poison with sentiment. Amira ignored him. We learned that instinct isn't always right. That emotion can guide better than hunger. You're an anomaly, Jurek said. No, she replied. We're the result of a long pattern of trial, error, pain, but we remember it all. That's our weapon. He let that settle. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, Have you ever lost? Her face changed. Yes, she whispered. Many times. And each time we mourn and rebuild and remember. That's what makes us, us. Jurek didn't ask for more wine that day, but he kept the tablet. And when Amira left, he didn't stop her. He didn't know it yet, but something had shifted, not in policy, in philosophy. That night, Jurek stood before the old skulls of every species the Dravari had conquered. They lined the Hall of Silence, a monument to victory. He stared at them and wondered if any of those species had stories. He had never asked. Until now. Weeks passed. The Galactic Station resumed its rhythm. Cold, efficient, absolute. Yet beneath its surface, something unfamiliar stirred. Dravari initiates began requesting human material. Fiction, art, history. At first, it was dismissed as curiosity. But then the High Fawn requested books be translated. Not manuals. Not tactical studies. Novels. Philosophy. Diaries. It spread in whispers. Young hunters trained by day and read by night. Commanders asked questions they never had before. Not about tactics or prey, but about meaning, about legacy. Ravik hated it. This is infection, he snarled in private council. She's unmaking us. She's challenging us. Jurek corrected. There's a difference. She's rewriting the order. Jurek considered that. Maybe the order needed rewriting. That answer fractured the room. Some applauded. Some growled. Ravik walked out. Meanwhile, Earth sent more emissaries. Not soldiers, but musicians, architects, linguists. They brought music encoded in light. Fractals woven from living threads. One day, a human child, barely 7 cycles old, recited a poem before the Apex Tribunal. It wasn't about war. It was about silence. And yet it shook them more than any weapon could have. The Dravari didn't understand how a species could sing in the face of death, or laugh while unarmed. That kind of strength had no place in their code, but it couldn't be denied. They began to test the humans. They issued challenges. Maze chambers. Logic traps. Memory duels. Humans passed all of them. Not with speed or force, but with persistence. They got lost, confused, even injured, but they finished. And then they documented how they did it, for others to learn. A Dravari strategist finally said aloud what many feared. They fight like a hive. No, Jurek replied. They fight like a story, each one building on the last. Every loss remembered, every error improved. One counselor asked the obvious, what if we fought like that? No one had an answer. That silence, deep and thoughtful, was the true start of the war. Not a war of weapons, but of identity. It came to a head when Ravik declared blood challenge against Amira. Not a surprise. She accepted without hesitation. It was a ceremonial duel honored in Apex culture, not to the death, but to the brink of submission. She entered the ring unarmored, armed only with a staff. Ravik came in full regalia, claws gleaming. Observers expected a slaughter. Instead, they got a lesson. Amira didn't win through strength. She dodged, redirected, let him tire himself, used every failed strike against him. He roared in rage. She remained silent, focused. Then, in a single moment, she stepped inside his guard, flipped him off balance, and pinned him with the staff to his throat. The room fell into stunned quiet. She didn't press. She stepped back. Ravik lay still, then laughed. It wasn't mockery. It was relief. She could have killed me, he admitted aloud. But she didn't, said Jurek. Because that wasn't the point, Amira added. I didn't come here to win. I came here to show you how we endure. Later, Ravik did something no Dravari had done in 1,000 cycles. He apologized and asked to learn, not from books, from humans. And so the shift became permanent. Dravari hunting academies added courses in ethics. Their young were taught to ask why, not just how. They learned that restraint could be stronger than rage. That creation could challenge destruction. Their fleet still existed, but now its use was questioned. They still taught combat, but also dialogue. The change wasn't immediate, but it was unstoppable. The galaxy noticed. Other species who had hidden began to speak. Some reached out to Earth directly. Others requested cultural exchange. The Apex Order frayed, but didn't collapse. It evolved. For the first time in centuries, peace was not just a pause between wars. It became a viable state, because one species, seen as prey, sat at a predator's table and brought bread, and because a predator expected to dominate, listened, and remembered the taste. The cycle of dominance had been broken, not with weapons, but with patience, with presence, with stories. 10 years after the banquet, the station's great hall bore a new symbol, not of a skull, not of a claw, but of an open palm beneath a rising sun. It wasn't a human emblem, nor a Dravari one. It was new, shared, forged by both. Jurek stood before it during the annual Accord gathering. His fur was streaked with gray now, shoulders heavier, but his gaze was steady. When he spoke, the chamber fell into respectful silence. We once believed Apex meant alone at the top, he said. But now we understand true strength is a choice to lift others up with you. The chamber echoed with a silence that had once been fearful. Now it was reverent. Amira sat among the delegates, not in armor, not in formal wear, but in a simple tunic, hands clasped, eyes calm. She had never once claimed victory, never asked for tribute. But every being in that room knew who had changed the course of 2 civilizations. The greatest warriors of the Dravari no longer competed to kill the largest beasts. They competed to build, to mentor, to create symphonies in tandem with Earth's composers. Starship hulls now bore poetry etched in nanocarbon. AI systems were programmed not just for efficiency, but for empathy. Children of both species were raised with dual heritage stories. They learned of ancient Earth kings and apex hunters, but also of bread shared at a table and the battle that never needed to be fought. War hadn't vanished, but now it wasn't the default. Even Ravik, once a firebrand, now oversaw the Joint Ethical Tribunal. His voice, once sharp with contempt, now echoed with balance. We were taught to fear softness, he once said to a room of cadets. But it is far harder to choose peace and war, and far braver to protect life than to end it. Amira would eventually return to Earth, not because she had to, but because others were ready to continue the work. She left behind no statues, no edicts, only teachings, stories, and the quiet expectation that the seeds she'd planted would grow. And they did. On frontier worlds, Dravari and humans co-founded settlements, not as conqueror and subordinate, but as equal survivors building anew. When an ancient threat emerged from beyond the galactic rim, it was not one species that responded, but a coalition forged through shared values, not shared fears. They fought side by side, and when victory was earned, they held a moment of silence, not for their fallen enemies, but for the civilizations that had never known this kind of alliance. Jurek Old Now recorded his final memoir not in Dravari glyphs, but in Terran Standard. Its final line read, "Apex is not what you destroy. It is what you protect. And who you break bread with when the hunt is done." That phrase would echo through centuries. And in time, when future species encounter humanity, they didn't ask, "How did you survive among the predators?" They asked, "What was in that bread?" And Earth's children would smile, because the answer wasn't yeast or grain or salt. It was memory. It was kindness. It was a choice not to dominate, but to dine. And that was how humanity secured its legacy, not as the strongest, not as the fastest, but as the first to look an apex predator in the eye and invite them to dinner.